Welcome, everyone, to another Native Paranormal Crossroads. We are introducing the Paranormal Rangers. Lady Michele, welcome to your show.
Thanks, Andrew. It's nice to be on my own show.
Jonathan, welcome to your show, as well as Stan. How you guys doing today?
Doing
Hello,
good.
Emma.
Just so everybody, and I'm joined once again by Dale Tobin and Laura the Queen Massey here. And we have
Hello,
a puppy
everyone.
who will be interfering often and licking toes in between. She is our other co host. Tonight we are going to be talking petroglyphs. So, what exactly are petroglyphs and what can we give people as a definition for them?
Okay, I'll start since I'm kind of the resident expert on it. Um, Petroglyphs and pictographs are two things that you'll see in ancient uh, carvings into rocks or stone surfaces. Um, a pictograph is painted on with mineral paints. They still don't know the formula of a lot of those paints that were used, but they've lasted hundreds of years. And scientists are still trying to work it out because we put a Coke can out in the sun for 6 months, it'll be gone. All the paint will be disappeared. Um, and then petroglyphs are things that are carved into the rock using different tools. And I should state right up front that these things should not be considered rock art, as a lot of people call them. They are not art for art's sake, they're communication. And so that gets into a whole nother subject. But it is a form of communication. It tells you what's going on in the area, who passed through, where the hunting is, what kind of game can be had, and what time of year. It tells you where the water sources are, and even gives you maps of the area. So these are petroglyphs. Petroglyphs. I have literally taken the same type of rock and tried to carve things in using modern tools. And I tell you what, it is extremely difficult to carve those things in, and yet you'll see massive panels. I know of one area where you can go in and see so many panels, it would take you 3 days to actually access all of them and look at them.
So, part of the difficulty of carving in stone is the hardness of stone. This is not just sandstone and limestone. A lot of that's on granite rock, isn't it?
Yes, it's all different kinds of stone. And what you'll notice is that they're very directional in their orientation. They're usually faced to an area where the sun is coming up, or usually toward the southeast, facing slopes. And there are some areas where you'll see a beautiful area of rock that has absolutely nothing on it, yet there's this black desert varnish all over it. It's a perfect place. And yet you'll see some little rock off to the side that has a bunch of panels on it. And there's you just wonder why the place was as it was.
Do some of them line up with the equinoxes and the solstices too, like in other parts of the world?
They do. They are lined up with celestial objects, and it's we don't even we're just beginning to understand. There's like Chaco Canyon. Some of Chaco Canyon is the structures are based on the belt of Orion, as are the pyramids and other ancient structures all around the world. So there had to be some knowledge being passed back and forth.
I lost connection, so I apologize. So I got back
You're
on.
back.
You didn't miss anything.
So they have connection to various star patterns, and then oftentimes they relate to the local tribes or the local groups of people that go in and out of an area, not unlike a newspaper, but more like a standing way of being aware of what's in the neighborhood. In our last show, you talked about how some of them could identify strange phenomena, such as Bigfoot being in the area.
Yes, Bigfoot has a long history with Native American tribes, as they do with indigenous people all over the world. They recognize them, they coexist with them. You're taught as a child, don't look it in the eyes, just leave it alone. You don't try to injure it. Just you're living, let it live, and leave it alone. And when I was with the Navajo Nation Rangers, we actually had a unwritten no shoot policy that we didn't want our officers to be taking pot shots at things, mainly because we didn't want them to be shooting something and say, I got a Bigfoot, and find a man laying down there with a zipper on the back of his suit. So we thought that maybe being circumspect in that area might yield dividends down the line, and maybe somebody wouldn't get shot doing that prank.
I definitely vote that we no one dress up in a gorilla or monkey suit and run around in the woods during hunting season.
Yeah, we just tend to look a little dumb doing that, but that's us.
But there's
So-
people that do it, so
They will do it, but no one's been shot yet, as far as we know, in a gorilla suit.
Now, what's interesting about the petroglyphs too, it actually goes back to the first contact with Native Americans. We won't even say 1492 because I think it was a lot earlier than that. We have evidence that China was here on the West Coast. We have evidence of Vikings on the East Coast. We have trade routes all over Central and South America. So I'm thinking that contact was a lot earlier. And these writings are a form of communication. They're a form of writing. Now, back in the day, there was a universal way for natives to communicate with each other. And that way was sign language. So you could travel all across the country back then, and you could still communicate in sign language because it was a universal language. We don't have a lot of that today. A lot of it is missing. But when the Europeans came over in 1492, they said that the natives didn't have a written language, so they called them savages. The true definition of the word savage means someone who doesn't have a written language. They didn't understand that we had what they call an oral tradition, which had to be exact. And it was memorized and it couldn't be deviated from. So we did have a form of recording of our history. And some of that was through petroglyphs and pictographs.
So, in your time as on the Rangers, you had an archaeological background. How many petroglyphs would you say there are in the Southwest Territories where you're at?
Just on Navajo, we have 300,000 archaeological sites recorded. There exists the possibility of 1.5 to 2.5 million archaeological sites that we don't know about yet. Some areas there are site densities up to 18 to 24 sites within a square mile. So there's a lot of stuff going on. These include cliff dweller sites, Anasazi sites, basket maker, ancient pueblo, and it just there's just so much.
Why would there be so many in one area?
Well, if you think about it, when we have people wanting to build a house, they have to get an archaeological survey where they come out and they do a surface ground survey of the land to make sure that nothing's there. Then they're allowed to build. We have had people in the past that don't go through this process. They build their house or their hogan, and then they would call us and say, right on my doorstep, there's a body that skeletal remains that washed up. And can you dig it up and remove it? And we tell them, no, you have to move your house because you didn't get the proper permits. That's their grave. You leave it alone. For Navajos, it's abhorrent to live on top or near human remains. So it's a very big taboo. So we have situations like that that used to pop up. We'd have not only ancient remains being exposed because of erosion, we would have historical remains back from the 1800s coming out of the ground. And we'd have modern remains also coming out of the ground, uh, from back in the 60s. So there's a lot of stuff. Part of our job was human reburial, and we'd have to make a determination if that those remains were modern or if they were ancient.
What were some of the oldest remains recorded? What they found, like for years? Was there any particularly ones which are really, really old, which the archaeologists found?
Well, the basket maker culture and probably the Fremont culture goes back more than 1,000 years, and we don't know the extent. Um, to give you an idea, um, modern science tells us that man has only been around for what 15, 20,000 years, and that's about it. But that number is being pushed out with new discoveries all the time up in Canada, where they're finding uh, remains and occupation remains that even go further back. The Navajos themselves and the Hopis have stories uh, in their background of Meteor Crater, and the stories go something to the idea that there were gods in the sky that decided there were three gods that wanted to commit suicide. They didn't want to live and be alive forever anymore, so they flung themselves at the earth on a thunderbolt and impacted where modern day Meteor Crater is between Flagstaff and Winslow on I-40. Now, what's interesting is the Hopis have a similar story that says that they had a settlement down in that area that was destroyed when the earthquake happened from that meteor, and ever since then they didn't build any more settlements down that way. That settlement very well could have been Homology, which is just on the north side of Winslow. But they never built down that far again. So both, the Navajos say that this happened at night. That's what the story says. And for them to have that kind of detail tells me that there had to have been eyewitnesses that passed the story down in the oral tradition. and it became part of the fabric of Navajo culture. Now, that impact happened 50,000 years ago, according to science. So, again, that would push out the date for human occupation of these lands to much, much earlier.
What's the general accepted date for the Hopewell, the Hopi and the Hopewell for active time?
The Hopi have been there since, boy, uh, since before recorded history. The oldest village in the world, continuously inhabited village, is Oribe, and then they have Kikotsmavi, which is nearby, but it's actually considered New Oribe, where the government resides. So they have been around, back in the 1600s, the 1500s, as near as we can tell, when recorded history started with the Spanish. The Spanish also encountered Navajos at that time. And the Spanish actually referred to the Navajos as the razor people because their arrow tips were obsidian, and they were so sharp. They're sharper than a razor blade. So they were very, very much feared to engage them in a battle. So yeah, I would say they've probably been here long time since the emergence of both cultures.
Okay. With that said, let's bring up some pictures of the different petroglyphs, and we'll go through them and help decipher what a petroglyph is, what it's speaking. Just turn the camera off.
Andrew, I took these in the Uinta Basin near a place called 9 Mile Canyon. 9 Mile Canyon is approximately 100 miles of petroglyph Fremont artwork. And you can go through that canyon, and it is chock full of the history of the Fremont's daily lives. This is considered a deity of their religious and social communities. And the Fremonts had a really interesting interaction with Sumerian written form. Now, I was introduced to this Sumerian written form. I was not able to get my picture, but apparently the language goes back to 600 BC. And this was considered one of the ancient language of the Algerian Libyan language. And today they deciphered it. And the deciphering of it is, you can read, it's called Reformed Egyptian. There was a gentleman from BYU, and professors of ancient languages call it Libyan language. And so today it's known as Reformed Egyptian. The Pima Indians down in Arizona use this language, and even today they use it in their writing and language skills. So petroglyphs were used to describe their daily lives, their gods, their communities, so on and so forth. And so it is Reformed Egyptian, and I had the opportunity to be a witness to seeing this. This is on tribal lands of this language, and I wish I had a photo of it. It is an amazing. And when I went to get it deciphered, this particular line had wrapped around, and the two last words, at first they couldn't decipher the word. And so basically what was interpreted was 5 warriors were wounded, died, and buried here in a straight line. So that's basically what that said. I wish I had that in a photographic thing. So we are older. Jonathan referred to that, but we are an older civilization than most people think. We go back anywhere 10,000 to 15,000 years ago, and our language was goes way, way back, and we were influenced by other cultures to develop our language.
It's beautiful as
Go
you're
ahead, Dave.
looking at as you're looking at this. It feels like you're connecting to the ancestors and those who drew it. It's absolutely beautiful feeling that. And what's it like for you, Michele, actually seeing that with your eyes and connecting to that frequency of the ancestors?
Well, it was interesting to be there at 9 Mile. I know that Jonathan's been there and Stan have been there. When you start to see these actualizations of civilizations on near reservations, you're looking at their migration patterns of where they've been, and they were leaving a history of things. Maybe it was a remembrance of where they camp. Maybe it was some kind of a celestial map, a navigational map as well. So that came to my mind is they were telling each other or other tribes that this is where we've been, and then we travel on. As you know, the Fremont Indian just one day suddenly disappeared, and no one knows where they went to this day. There's talk about, they scattered, but their remnants were never
Well,
heard of again.
The Fremont, the Hopi, and the Anasazi pretty much disappeared at the same time, right?
Right, right. And there's just speculations out there, drought could have been an issue, food, farming, things couldn't, they migrated onwards, but where? But where?
Yeah, the thing is, their culture didn't reappear anywhere else.
No, they just suddenly disappeared. In the Anasazi aspect, we are the Pueblo Indians. We as Native Americans depict that they are the modern day Pueblo Indians, and that they kind of integrated into tribes. And who's to know what the cataclysmic event that happened or their migration patterns after the fact? They
Okay.
just disappeared.
So let's go to this next image here. What's going on in this image?
Oh, that's an interesting one for interpretation. I'll let Jonathan handle this one. And or Stan.
You're muted, John.
Has muted my mic. So
There you go. You're good.
we'll blame the host. Anyway, as I was saying, he's let's see. Okay, this is actually a man. He's got 5 fingers on each hand. You can see the 2 eyes. He's got a headdress on of some type. So he's a leader of some type.
Mhm.
Usually you'll see very unusual types. I mean, you could look at this and say, hey, there's only one eye in the middle. It looks like one of these bug-eyed monsters. But I think he's without context. This is a figure of a man. And you have to understand that, again, this is not artwork. This isn't science fiction, fancy, carved into the rock by somebody. This is something that was seen. And sometimes you have stories of native tribes traveling through different, what we call dimensions now, but back then they would have considered it a different world. You have the Navajo talking about coming through a succession of different worlds that were inhabited by different creatures and different insect peoples and different giants and everything else until they reach this world. You have Hopis that came out from underground from an emergence location um, in the bottom of the Grand Canyon. And so you have a lot of stories. Other native tribes have similar stories all across the United States of an emergence. We reinterpreted that migration symbol as a dimensional portal because we started seeing that that our story tells actually of coming in two different worlds through a hole in the sky. And so a lot of tribes have these stories. The Hopis today have 250 to 350 different kachinas representing uh, beings that they've contacted um, during their
Yeah, usually.
ceremonies or wanderings or whatever.
Can you
And
explain? Can you explain what a kachina is?
a kachina, just so everybody knows, and you
Mhm.
can look it up on the internet, are these dolls that used to be just very plain painted sticks made out of a cottonwood root that's very lightweight and easy to carve. And they were given to children to show them what these individual gods would look like, or, holy beings is what they're referred to. The This art form has actually gotten to the point now where these things are uh, the human figure is correct. They look like the actual dancer. Some of them can command thousands and thousands of dollars to purchase now. So if you're going to start collecting kachinas, um, be careful. Number one, I've actually had Hopi people tell me that the kachinas on their mantel place would sometimes switch places in the middle of the night, and then you have so many of them, and at about figure about $500 to $1,000 a piece, uh, you're looking at a lot of money to collect. You know, you know how we are when we collect; we got to have them all.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a
would
color.
each tribe have its own types of holy being, different holy beings than the Navajo, or was there a general sort of holy being or
Yeah,
god?
the Navajos have the Yebiche, which are considered holy beings that came to the Navajo to impart knowledge. You'll see these uh, pictures of somebody with a mask over their head. It's black and it has two little white eyes, and they they're usually shown on TV as Skinwalker.
Mhm.
Uh, so in our presentations, we often put a picture of the Pope up and say that according to the same reasoning, this is Satan. Uh, Depending on what denomination you come from, that could be true. But it's taking an image that looks otherworldly and suborning it to what just because it looks strange. Uh, the Yebiche are actually beings that are here to help us. And like I said before, the last Yebiche and the lion of usually 10 or 12 is considered the clown. He's the one that's
Mhm.
goofing up, making all the mistakes. And he actually represents the five fingered people. That's you and me, who cannot take instruction. The holy beings tell us not to war with each other, and we're the ones that go out and war with each other. So we do the seemingly the exact opposite of what we're being taught to stay away from.
I really find it interesting as you're saying this, Jonathan. I'm remembering that why the oral history is so important as we talk about language. I wish I had a photo. Next time we get on, I will find that photo. How language, every tribe has its own language, has its own emergent stories, it has its own deity stories. In this picture, the five fingers were in relation to an important person in the community that was regarded in Chaco Canyon in their depiction of petroglyphs. They have six-fingered people, and that was also considered somebody of importance within the community. Who we don't, I mean, we just know we have this artwork out there, and um, there are ceremonial occasions where it's being taught to the younger generation through sacred ceremonies of what the depiction of these gods to us are. But we don't have it all. We don't have everything. We don't have everything, the structure, because everybody has their own emergence and creation stories. So that's what's so fascinating about being Native American across the board, is every tribe had their own depiction of their deities and gods.
Yeah, we have actually seen a panel depicting a man, 4 fingers on one hand, 6 fingers on the other hand, and the same with the toes, 4 fingers or 4 toes and 6 toes. He has a distended stomach, and he has distended genitalia hanging down. What was interesting about that, talk about historical context, that panel is right next to 98 open uranium tailings pits where uranium was being mined. And I can't help but wonder if the ancient peoples of that area actually built some of their structures out of this uranium log material, and we're being irradiated and we're seeing birth defects. This picture was put up indicating that there was somebody with a defect, but in those days, someone with six fingers and 4 fingers would be considered maybe blessed by the gods, because you do see depictions of holy people that have 3 fingers and 4 fingers, or even 6 fingers.
And about what year did the horse come around?
I would imagine during the conquistador, when the conquistadors came across from Spain.
About
There was
1600s.
Yeah. Could have been even earlier, 1400s, when Columbus came to the West Indies.
Yeah, when he got lost and made that wrong left turn.
Yeah. Saddled up the horse wrong.
So yeah, so me and Stan have been to so many of these sites. A lot of the pictures that I have, I wasn't able to get them into this presentation because they're on slides. I used to do, this is before PowerPoint. Back in the 90s, we had Rolodex of slides to go through. And so all my pictures of ruins and stuff like that are on slides, and I don't have any way to transfer them at this time. But we've run into just literally thousands of these sites in remote places where possibly very few people have ever been to and seen. And talk about adventures. Some of them are so dangerous to get to. Stan can tell you stories about having to rescue people that were in a group that were looking at things because they got trapped on a cliff. So it gets kind of dicey when you're trying to get to some of these locations. Some of them you actually have to rappel into.
And why would they be built in such unique places like that, like having to rappel into?
In this case, we're talking about the cliff dwellers.
Yeah.
Okay, so that was their natural defense. Okay.
Now, you have to make a differentiation. Navajos talk about Anasazi. They talk about what was that? The tribe up there in your area, Michelle?
Ute Nation.
No,
Shoshone.
the early one.
Shoshone? No.
The Fremont.
The Fremonts.
Yeah. So had a brain fart there. But the Fremont, the Anasazi, they were also knew the basket maker and what they called cliff dwellers
Mm-hmm.
and the Hopi or the Pueblo people. The Pueblo people are not just the Hopi; they're all over, you know,
Mm-hmm.
all the way over toward Texas. And the reason that they differentiate between Anasazi and cliff dwellers were considered the ones that built Mesa Verde. The Anasazi in Navajo culture were slavers, and they picked up slaves from different areas and basically held them in slavery at Chaco Canyon. If you look at the construction of Chaco Canyon, look at the walls. If you ever go there, you will see different masonry styles. Now, imagine if you captured people from different tribes in the area and they had different methods of building, and you told them, okay, I want this wall built or this section built, but each group had a different method of building. And so you'll see some of this evidence. Eventually, the Anasazi, they said that the gods caused a huge sandstorm and drought to take place that basically drove them out. And they've disappeared from the scene, never to be seen again. So, that's the story. Now, the cliff dwellers, many of them were incorporated into clans of the Navajo. So you have Kia'ani, the Towering House clan, that was incorporated as a clan of the Navajo. You also have Mojave Indians
Mm-hmm.
that were picked up, and there's two clans that are related to the Mojave. There are other clans that are related to to the um, to the Mexicans that were incorporated in. So Navajo had a way of investing people and saying, "Hey, you're welcome here. This is your clan." I wish we could do something like that today.
We
It's really
can. The digital clan.
a digital clan, yeah. It's really interesting as he talks about ancient civilizations and the emergence of the slave trade. There was a lot of raiding going on amongst the Native Americans in early days and practices. And so I think there was really interestingly enough is how did ancient reformed Egyptian get into the Uinta Basin, and did the Egyptians interact with these tribes in those areas? Of course, and I'm not talking about the Ute Indians. I'm talking about older civilizations, Shoshone, Fremont. Was there a language
There
crossing
was.
going over? Yeah, and
The
you
Cree
know,
Indians, of Canada speak a very different form of Hebrew, actually.
yeah,
There are many, many Cree stories being contacted by the different Hebrew priests after they heard them talking. And in the late 80s, a group of Cree Indians, I forgot the name of the chief that went there. I interviewed him on Wolf Spirit Radio some years ago. But they brought there and they were speaking an older form of Hebrew that was word for word exact. Like Hebrew is meant to be kept exact, the Torah is meant to be kept exact. So it was a different dialect. The original Cree language links to Hebrew. Many, many of the culture's language have a common root language to the Middle East Sumerian cuneiform connections.
exactly. And it's really interesting. A lot of the Utes will say, "No, we're related to the Aztecans," when in fact it's now been determined that they're connected to the Chinese. And so there's this integration going on in ancient civilization with other cultures from across the oceans. We don't want to get into the Pangea of this landmass, but or even get into the Ice Age. These people were traveling over, and now they're finding, archaeologically speaking, a group from France came over here in those times and influenced a lot of the Canadian Native Americans, First Nations. So there's this, and now archaeological evidence is coming forth now that they're finding these ties to other cultures of ancient civilization, in the European area. So it's a really interesting to understand migration patterns, and then how we get some of our emergence and our stories that come through that. We just don't have exact written history to tell us, just these leftover petroglyphs that just tell about daily life, what's going on, who's important, who's not important. We have no names. We have no, other types of art. What was the practice of the art form back then?
All right, so let's move on to the next petroglyph.
Okay.
What do we got going on here?
Well, what I was told is this was a connection to the cosmos. As you can see, the vortex over here. Jonathan might have a different version, but this is what I was told. This was a connection. We have spiritual connections to the cosmos, and these things were going on in the solar system. This was a part of our connections. As you can see, there's someone held the knowledge right there, that interesting man down there.
So you don't think this is I Dream a Genie in the Bottle?
Oh yeah.
No, I'm just kidding. If you look at that swirl on the right, it's really evocative of a galaxy.
Mm-hmm.
And it amazes me that they would, back then in the 600s, 800s, they would know about galaxies. How did they know? You can't see a galaxy with your naked eye.
Mm-hmm.
You can see the Milky Way, but we're right in the middle of it. We're on the western spiral arm. So, it doesn't give you that perspective of what one looks like. So there's a lot going on that I see. That's again, it just makes you question, and we don't have a lot of information, like I said. And interestingly, what I've found with archaeology is that archaeologists will get ready to do a dig, they'll write up their paper, and they'll say, we expect to find the following. So they've already made up their minds what they're expecting to see and what they're expecting to find. If they find anything else, it's tossed aside.
Right. Which goes against scientific explorations, the nature of the observer.
That's right.
Mm-hmm. All right, Joe, let's go to the next image.
Jonathan, those are warriors.
Yes, they are. And they are in the typical Fremont style, which is a trapezoidal figure. You have the mountain sheep on the upper left, and you'll see depictions of them all over the place.
I'd like to find out what kind of jewelry he was wearing.
You too could have a Fremont earrings, huh?
Yeah, exactly.
What's the in the middle on the left hand side, that like infinity symbol or like an egg timer on its side? The figure of 8.
The bow tie looking thing.
Yes.
Well, I believe that is something that's hanging on his arm. There's more to that symbol because we saw that in an earlier picture. And
Yes.
So it extends further, almost like a jagged
Mhm.
lightning bolt going out of there.
Okay.
Laura, I would imagine there were people in the community of the Fremonts that had distinctive roles they played. And so the artisan of this particular petroglyph was showing the importance of that scene. Maybe it's something, a celebration, who knows? See, that's the thing about petroglyphs. You can conjecture anything you want, what you want to see.
Okay, what's in the bottom right? It's kind of faded out. It looks like a half moon connected to a stick.
Oh yes.
Oh, yes, I see that.
In the on the bottom right to that right, there's another. Looks like the same thing. Two half moons meeting each other.
Could it be a solstice calendar?
It could be some kind of calendar, or it could be an actual stylistic representation of corn.
Okay.
Yes.
So are these guys defending their corn rights from the sheep?
Or protecting them, or maybe they're protecting their fields. Yeah, when the time comes, I'm going to go talk to those ancient ones.
One thing that I see in this is that often you'll have varying size of different characters or beings,
Mm-hmm.
and whether that's actually showing a three-dimensional rendering of an event that's occurring, or if the size of the beings is in relation to the importance of that individual, maybe a shaman or a medicine person, or maybe the leader of a group of people, or something of that nature. But there's a lot of detail within these panels. You'll see at times not only different types of animals depicted, but different varying beings that are present. You'll have different tools and weaponry and things of that nature. Like John said earlier, headdresses. You may even have some type of armor or clothing or shields or something of that nature too. So they're very detailed. Yeah.
Yeah, it's really interesting, Stan. Being up in the Uinta Basin and going to the Dinosaur National Park, it was interesting because we did a depiction with one of the Ute leaders there. It was really interesting what he said about this particular petroglyph. I wish I had that photo too. He was saying basically is in their lore, they showed a depiction of the little people, the Sasquatch on this wall. It was pointed out and it was very distinct. And then he said there was a gathering of nations, which shows a lot of people that depicted that too, that sometime they gathered together all nations of that area, and whatever they were gathering for, maybe it was celebration, maybe it was harvest, who knows? Maybe it was treaty time, who knows, and ceremonial time, that they all came together in peace. So he depicted that being that's what it was in their lore and their culture and their tribe, according to the oral history that they gotten, similar to what we do as Navajos and our other ancestor forms of tribal affiliations.
What are your thoughts on how these were placed on the rock? You know, how they were done. What are some of your thoughts on that? How they were drew onto the rocks and the artwork?
Well, John and I, a lot of times we've discussed that a lot of these ancient peoples were actually their technologies were in advance of what we are today, and we look in general in science today. They look back on those times and say these people were very primitive and you know. But John and I don't really we don't follow along those lines. We think that those peoples a lot of times were much more advanced than we are today, and had technologies in some cases that far surpasses science today. So
Yeah, archaeologists would say we diminished to a stone type of tool with kind of a chisel type made out of stone. That's where it got diminished. And then, and with the Rangers, I really feel that we had technologies, maybe as people would say, on the mystical side, and we might be missing those abilities for them to, maybe they were the sacredness of what they were trying to depict. For that to last 10,000 years is an amazing technology. And like the pyramids of Egypt, one thing they were saying, how could they get those lines really straight? And apparently there was a guy in South America who found a certain plant that had a certain glue, and the Egyptians, he said, concocted a formula where they could put a plaster on the pyramids and preserve the outside, and they've lasted this long. So it was a certain type of plant glue, and that's kind of an interesting concept, similar to cement to our day.
well, I think
Yeah.
it's commonly understood that um, what people refer to as extraterrestrial today, uh,
Mhm.
beings from other solar systems and that are being reported and witnessed, forms of like UFOs and or what they refer to as UAPs, the things that are being seen today. So you talked about people like the Zuni, and Clifford Mahudi, who's now no longer with us. He used to talk about how the Kachinas really, in his view, represented these star people or these people from other galaxies, other star systems. And in the technologies we're seeing with these UFOs, these things can be probably millions of years in advance of the technologies we have to this day. And if they were in direct contact with the ancients, the people of that time, you talk about Basketmaker and Fremont, and if they were in direct contact with these beings, then they may have been uh, open to those technologies that the extraterrestrials may have had, and may have gifted them with certain technologies and stuff. So you talked about the pyramids, and there's things that modern man can't even to this day, with all his technology, can't duplicate. So um, it's very interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, let
The just to be straight up with this, the Hopi tribe has stories of its people using baskets and gourds to fly in. In ancient India, there were tales of ships that could fly
Mhm.
in the sky.
Yep.
and even of atomic weapons. And they've been doing excavations over there. Even in the Holy Land, they found an area with one ruin on top of the next, on top of the next. And then they ran into a layer of fused green glass. The only other time we found a layer of fused green glass was at the atomic test site during World War II, when the first nuclear bomb was set off. The sand on the top surface turned to green glass. So I think really that we've been on this planet for a long, long time. We may have destroyed ourselves several times.
Mhm.
I think other Indian tribes have stories of flying, of their people being able to access dimensional gates, uh, of even interstellar flight. So, we just don't know. We don't look at that stuff. We like to say, oh, everybody was a caveman, going ugh, 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 and beating a woman over the head and dragging her off by her hair. And we that's our version. Yet 10,000 years ago, the Chinese were studying medicine, and a lot of their stuff is being used today. We're just starting to get to the point. I can remember when, if you wanted to see an acupuncturist back in the 90s, they looked at you like you were going to go see a witch doctor. And now it's pretty much, even the hospitals have acupuncturists. So, chiropractors the same way. You were poo-pooed if you wanted to see a chiropractor. And you see jokes about that today. Oh, they're not real doctors. So we look at it from a monetary standpoint. Doctor makes a lot of money, so he's got to be good, right? And nobody else makes that much money, so they don't get the
A
same
lot of
prestige.
a lot of doctors graduated with a C plus average. Okay,
Right.
a
That's
lot of
true.
doctors. The vast majority of them are C plus average. Okay. Let's move on to
So
the next petroglyph.
let's do it.
To me, it looks like some kind of insectoid type of being. It's a representation.
I would think there's probably a lot more to that panel, but you
Yeah,
can see that it's basically from getting wet and freezing, it's spalled off,
yeah.
and a lot of it is missing.
The other thing too is a lot of these sites have been vandalized, and over the years, people have shot these things with firearms and or hit it with rocks and damaged or destroyed things. They've even removed some of the actual panels at times, which is it's too bad that people are have that level of ignorance to damage these things.
Yeah, and even well-meaning people have used chalk to outline, to mark inside the lines on these to make them stand out more. But
Mhm.
that chalk actually goes into that rock and can destroy it from the inside out. They've also taken sheets and taken paint with rollers and rolled over the top so they can get an impression and take that sheet home, but the paint gets left on the rock too, which can also damage it.
So there's very few ways to actually record it other than going in with a 3D camera and then rendering it afterwards, which is only
Yeah,
some
my recommendation is
available.
my recommendation is a 3D camera or a camera on a tripod that you can get
Yep,
accurate pictures.
the right filters.
Well, I was very fortunate that I could get these photos because these are on native reservation lands and they do not let anybody just go. You have
Okay.
to go and get a guide with you to to find them.
Okay.
I was
Let's
very
move on to the next one.
okay. Those are more warriors getting ready for a war. Wish you could enhance that and
Yeah, they're very stylized, but
Mhm.
there's definitely a group of them. And if you look closely, the two leader figures are actually almost look like they have helmets on with antenna.
Mhm.
There's insectoid types down over on the left that
Right.
you can see.
So when the warriors and the insectoids show up, what does that signify?
Usually, usually signifies that there's some kind of alliance there that they're
Okay.
working together.
So they're not just having a barbecue.
No.
Maybe later.
The interpretation I was told it was they were going to war because there was a lot of history going to war with the conquistadors, and the natives fought the conquistadors and won. Because some of this art is time. They still use the interpretations as such as you're going to see in these next slides where how far into the future they go. So the tribe allows different timelines of
Okay. I believe we only got a couple more picks. Let's go to the next one. We got sheep.
livestock.
Yeah, and there's more there, but it's worn out. I mean, you can't even make it out anymore. So you put the sheep up there, and the dog starts barking.
Okay. Let's go on to the next one. There we go.
So
Got a good horse here.
this is really interesting. When I took this photo, I was told that back in the times of the infrastructuring of the West, the homesteading and everything, cowboys would come and they would depict their art in the same area. So this is modern day petroglyphs depicting who was in the area at that time, which I thought was really fascinating because it is
Really cool.
detailed. Yeah, it's a really cool piece of modern art.
Yeah, it looks like Roy Rogers.
Exactly. Big hat.
They were still roaming the range, and so this is a good, modern piece of I do believe it was 1920s when this art was depicted, but they were still doing that even on the reservation, which I thought was fascinating.
Well, any final words that you want to talk about for petroglyphs?
Yeah, again, to reinforce that these are not art for art's sake. They are historical renderings of some events that actually took place. They are not an artist going out there like we see today and doing a mural on the side of the building. So I do not call them art. I refer to them always as petroglyphs or pictographs, but never refer to them as rock art because it isn't art for art's sake. And these things, unfortunately, we're not growing any new ones. What we have is a finite supply. And as these get damaged or stolen, then they're gone forever. And we'll have no idea. Nobody can try to interpret them later on.
Right.
I would just remind people that go out and visit these sites to not be putting your hands on them or affecting them, contacting them with any instrument or anything like that. In order to preserve them, when you place your hands on these, you're putting the oils from your hands into the rock, and during the regular cycle of the year, you know, it's exposed to hot temperatures, sun, and winter, and freezing, and by doing that, by exposing it to oils in your hands and other things, it's going to affect it. It's going to damage it, and so uh, feel free to look and enjoy it, take a picture of it. Maybe you know set up your easel and paint a picture of it on the side or whatever, but please protect it. Do what you can to protect it. And especially if you see somebody vandalizing these sites, please speak up and because we, like John said, we only have a set number of these and we're just now learning a lot from them. So for future generations, protect them.
Okay. Well, we are at the end of the podcast. You guys are doing a membership drive. Please go to the Paranormal Rangers website. There'll be a QR code up in the corner over there for all those of you QR code capable. It'll take you right to the website. There's a special offer that's going on for just $15 a month. You can come and join the Paranormal Rangers beyond their podcast, have backroom access through the members shows only. That will be once a month. They do members shows. Please give them a little bit of love and go on to the website. Sign up for the email, also the email list, so you know what's coming on with the Paranormal Rangers. All right, guys, any last words that you want to say before we go to our next podcast?
Happy Valentine's and watch out for the Cupids.
Yes, watch out for the cupids. All right,
Yeah,
guys. Go ahead.
I just thank you to everybody that tuned in. We appreciate it.
And
Thank you.
keep an ear and an eye out open. We've got some special stuff coming up with the Paranormal Rangers. All right, everybody. We'll see you next week. Same bat time, same bat channel for the Paranormal Crossroads podcast.